Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 78. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation, coming off the divisional games and getting ready for the AFC and NFC title games. It'll take place next Sunday, and then there were four. And Dave, truth be told, I only saw one play the entire Cowboys 49ers game. It was the last one, and I'm still trying to figure out what the heck that was supposed to be.
Yeah, all of that for that, that was kind of my reaction on Twitter. And I forgot to go to Pro Football Focus this morning. Did Zeke get charged with a pressure?
I think so.
And here's the other thing that instantly ran through my mind. Me and running backs and paying running backs a lot of money specifically, let alone drafting them in the first round. Zeke is now scheduled to make almost $11 million in 2023. And I think he have something like under 900 yards rushing this past year. Long story short, and not trying to turn this into Cowboys Depot here, although the Stephen A. Smith Depot show probably will be worth tuning into today because he hates the Cowboys and gives it to his old buddy there. What's his name?
Skip Bayless.
Yeah, Skip Bayless there. But the thought ran through my head last night with Zeke scheduled to earn $11 million next year, and the Cowboys. Look, every team's going to have to probably look at cap situations one way or the other. Could that potentially have been Zeke's last snap in a Cowboys uniform?
It may have.
And if it was, how crazy is that?
It may have been. Now, I know that Jerry Jones loves Zeke, has always stood by Zeke. And also, congrats to you, Dave. That might have been a record for the earliest fungible quote in a Terrible Podcast episode. That was record time you hit that one. And then to your point, Tony Pollard, their best back's a day three kind of guy, although I think he broke his leg in that game, which is unfortunate for him. But yeah, I don't know too much about the future of Zeke. It would not surprise me, but I also know that Jerry loves Zeke Elliott.
Man, that's bad about Tony, isn't it? I really like that kid. What is it about those Memphis backs?
I know. Gibson, Pollard.
And as soon as he went down, I put out there on Twitter, man, he's lucky that thing didn't snap. And unfortunately, you see him getting carted off with a towel up over his head, after not too long after that. Wow. Well, I guess we'll start there, right? The game's over the weekend.
Yeah, to keep it as close to the Steelers and AFC North as possible, the Cincinnati Bengals, one of those final four teams, beating the Buffalo Bills pretty convincingly, 27-10 in Buffalo in the snow on Sunday. I know that obviously Burrow in the pass game gets so much attention, and understandably so, T. Higgins, what those guys do, but that Bengals run game to me has always been underrated. They ran for well over 100 yards, averaged over 5 yards per carry, despite an offensive line that's lost a lot of pieces. Joe Mixon to me has always been a pretty solid back, and that run game I thought was pretty valuable yesterday.
One of the narratives coming into this game, going into that game, was the shape of that offensive line. This is a Bengals offensive line that got a lot of talk about during the offseason last year, right? And they went out and added some pieces that I think I thought were kind of questionable overall, and then they lost some of those guys to injury. Here is your starting five yesterday against the Bills, Alex. Jackson Carman at left tackle, Volson, that young kid out of where was he? North Dakota State. A year ago, we were talking about him at I think the Shrine Bowl. Karras at center. Sharping at right guard, and Adeniji at right tackle. Because remember, they had Liel get hurt. I mean, the fact that they pieced that offensive line together. I mean, how many of these guys were week one starters, Alex?
Karras and Jonah Williams at left tackle, I believe, are the only two.
Right, but Carmen.
Jonah was hurt, so it wasn't even him. Yeah, I think it was just Karras is the only starter in that game.
Okay, and this was already a unit that was questionable last offseason. They addressed it, and even after they addressed it, you're like, no, wasn't Alex Kappa supposed to be one of these guys? He was inactive yesterday as well.
He was hurt. Right? Yeah, he was supposed to be. They had 4 new starters to the O-line this year. Only Williams was returning at left tackle, but for this game, I believe Karras was the only actual starter from week one.
All right, so what is that? Wilson. And look, I mean, I know Buffalo's hadn't been perfect, at times against the run this year, but I mean, what does it say about that Bengals offensive line in the state that it was in on Sunday, that they were able to get done what they got done?
It is weird because they did this last year with a bad offensive line that got upgraded this offseason. How many times was Burrow sacked in the playoff run last year to the Super Bowl? I mean, like 20-something times. And so I don't really know how they're doing it. It's kind of like the Steelers in 08 with that line of like Darnell Stapleton and Hartwig. I mean, it wasn't a good offensive line. They made it work. Obviously, I think quarterback play, again, masks and compensates for a lot of otherwise bad play across your offense. So when you have, Burrow and Chase and Higgins, and you have those guys really playing great football, I guess that can overcome a pretty shoddy offensive line.
Well, that's kind of where was where I was trying to lead you to drink from right there, was the fact that, and look, I'm not going to say offensive line is overrated, but within all that, I mean, quarterback play and, obviously play calling and execution, man, they got some receivers over there, don't they? In Boyd and obviously Chase and Higgins. Hurst has really come up big for them at times throughout the year as well too. They've got guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield in Mixon and all. I guess what I'm saying is, and the Steelers, we've said this several times, man, you look at what the Steelers were able to get done with their offensive line just from a health standpoint and how unlikely we are to see that again. I think, when you get to this offseason, without a doubt, they've got to address this offensive line during the draft at some point. If not for anything, because they're going to have to add some depth to it, and then, add some competition that will push right out of the chute as well too. But I just think it speaks volumes that this team was able to beat a Buffalo Bills team in Buffalo in the snow. The whole Damar Hamlin storyline. I didn't give Cincinnati a chance in this game. I really did not at all. And for what they were able to do, and look, we haven't even talked about what they were able to do on the defensive side of football.
Right. Mike Hilton making plays. To me, Sam Hubbard's always been underrated. Logan Wilson's been such a key piece as an off-ball linebacker. The secondary with Bates and Bell, it's a solid group overall. And so they'll take on the Chiefs, and they'll face the, potentially limping Patrick Mahomes, who did enough to beat Jacksonville, but seems to have some sort of ankle sprain, and obviously expect him to play in that game, but never want to see a top player like Mahomes not be at his very best.
Yeah, and kudos to him from being able to get himself back in that game and, making a few things happen on top of it there. So get a repeat of last year's AFC Championship game. That should be entertaining. And, man, here we are talking about the Bengals again. I mean, what's the common takeaway from the Final Four overall?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my first thought was going to be quarterback play, but then you have a Brock Purdy in there as the outlier, as the 7th round pick, a literal Mr. Irrelevant. But I mean, he's played well, and the scheme's been great. And you talk about how scheme can match personnel and elevate personnel. No one does it better than Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing, and this is something that you and I talked about, all throughout the season here, and I think we highlighted a couple of shows ago that, man, it's good to see some other people finally grasp hold of this now. Yards after the catch just can't be talked about enough when it comes to the Steelers coming out of this season. You look at Sports Info Solutions, and look, you can go to, I think ESPN keeps team stats on this. I mean, most of them, Pro Football Focus, most of them are going to be pretty close in line with what the actual numbers are. But, Sports Info Solutions, I think, does a great job of organizing all this stuff. I went back this morning and pulled a couple of spreadsheets and numbers on that. The Steelers averaged a little over 4.05 yards after per catch last season, and they were last in the NFL when it comes to that number during the regular season. So, in other words, on every catch, on an average, they average only little over 4 yards per catch there. You look at the top 5 teams in the NFL regular season overall, the 49ers at 6.78. I mean, that's 2.73 more yards after the catch, them alone. The Chiefs, 6.71. This was a bit surprising. The Panthers at 6.54. The Lions at 6.07, and then the Eagles 6.03. So those top 5 teams in average yards after the catch, all over 6. And then you got the Steelers at 4.05 in last in the NFL. You want to talk about a good place to start with this offense and making it better for a young quarterback in 2023. It's what we've been talking about for most of the season there. It's yards after the catch. It's getting guys running out in space. Less of these curls and comebacks and out routes, and more of these overs and slants and that seams and stuff like that. That will tremendously increase things, because, and I'm not going to I'm not trying to make this sound like a 1-to-1 comparison here, because it obviously isn't. But when you look at just average depth of completion for quarterbacks during the regular season last year, completed air yard average, you have Patrick Mahomes at 5.4. All right. So his average completed air yard distance was 5.4 yards past the line of scrimmage. Kenny Pickett's was 0.1 better than that at 5.5. And once again, I'm not trying to say, well, there you go, Kenny's better than Mahomes. But I mean, it just goes to show you that you need more than just that. You need the yards after the catch. We just mentioned that the Chiefs are in the top 5 in the NFL in yards after the catch average. So it's a different kind of completed air yard in there, right?
It is, and that's a good way to kind of break that down even more. What I think is most interesting about the numbers you just gave in terms of the top YAC teams is to see San Francisco in that top spot. And I suppose that in itself is not that surprising, but on paper, in theory, the Matt Canada offense is supposed to be pretty similar to the Kyle Shanahan-based offense. West Coast, play action, boots. Actually, in some respects, I believe that Shanahan kind of learned some of this stuff from Matt Canada, in his earlier days. But it feels like the Canada offense it's the old student surpassing the master, where the Canada offense was built to a degree. It laid a foundation, and other coaches took it, ran with it, and built off it. And Canada never really has. And so, schematically, philosophically, I think it's similar to what teams like the 49ers want to do, but those other teams just execute it and scheme it at a much higher level. Absolutely.
And I mean, that's what, and going back to that stat real quick of the completed air yard average, Joe Burrow, where was he? 5.6. So you got Mahomes 5.4, Pickett 5.5, Burrow 5.6, Purdy 5.9. And who else is in there? Jalen Hurts at 6.1. Who's the other quarterback still alive that I haven't talked about?
Did you get them all? It's Purdy. It's Mahomes and Burrow. and Purdy and Hurts.
Okay. All right. I got them all there then.
Yeah.
So, once again, I'm not trying to put Kenny Pickett in that category there. I'm just trying to kind of emphasize the importance of the yards after catch. When you got a guy like Deebo Samuel too, that guy should legally change his last name to Yak.
And George Kittle. And yeah, I understand the 49ers, you can argue they have more talent, and you're probably right about that. I don't think Pittsburgh's devoid of talent. They don't have a George Kittle or a Deebo Samuel. So I understand you would still maybe expect the 49ers to have better numbers, but not a difference between literally the best versus literally the worst. And the 49ers are on their third quarterback, a seventh round rookie. So to me, the talent stuff doesn't, it isn't a valid enough argument to me. So again, just to see that Yak disparity when in theory on paper, both offenses should function pretty much the same.
Right.
So interesting.
I'm just trying to kind of to wrap about, immediately after seeing what happens in these kind of games and the Steelers not be in it, you start seeing, well, how close are the Steelers? What do the Steelers need to do to get in this area? And then here's the other thing. Going to set a record, maybe get into this in the podcast as well too. The intended air yards. Not intended air yards. The adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat. When you look at that from the regular season compared to where we are at right now, if I would quit putting a question mark in here and put a slash, I can go over these real quick. All right, of the final four teams still alive right now, when looking at adjusted net yards per passing attempt differentials, the Eagles finished the season number 1, the 49ers number 2, the Chiefs number 3, and the Bengals number 6. And one thing that sticks out about all those is the defensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat. Remember, we've talked about this 5.8 number quite a bit. You got to be probably around that 5.8 or less to have a good chance at making a run at it. Overall, all four of those teams have a 5.8 defensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat or lower. And then on the offensive side of the football, you got 3 of the 4 teams over 7. You have the Eagles at 7.2, the 49ers at 7.5, the Chiefs at 7.9, and then the Bengals at 6.7. So the Bengals, you're bringing in kind of the lower side of that, but their defense was good enough that it produced a positive differential between the two sides of 0.9. And, my theory's always been you better be at a 1.0 differential or better heading into the playoffs. If you're going to make a run at this thing, they're right there at 0.9. But chalk up another victory for that stat that everybody hates me talking about. And the Steelers finished at a 5.0 offensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat and a defensive stat, which wasn't bad considering how they started losing Watt and yada, yada at 5.9. So their offense glaringly was the difference in there. And we have to see that number go from 5.0. I mean, if you want to talk about this team actually making a run to at least 6.7 next year. I mean, that's asking for a huge jump in that number.
It is, but it is pretty wild to see the predictive power of that stat, like the clear correlation and causation between the teams that rank highly in that stat always are the teams that are finishing at the very end. So I like that stat because that seems to be the one that really tells you who the actual truly best teams are.
Right. And look, you usually get that picture painted with this stat by week 7, because obviously it takes because one game can really shift the stat early in the season. But man, by the time that you get to week 7, week 8 of the season with this stat, you can usually say, well, this team's going to the playoffs and can make a run, or this team's not,
And as you say,
go ahead.
For Kenny Pickett, about 6 games in, you'll have a pretty good feel for where he's at. So week 7 will probably be very important for the Pittsburgh Steelers to check in on how their season and how their future looks.
I agree. Look, the tape trumps all, right? But within that, you can look at certain, of these advanced analytics. And I mean, there's not a stat that I look at more on a weekly basis, I don't think, than there is just, thumbing around some of this adjusted net yards for passing attempt stat, because you've got to be able to throw the football throughout an NFL season.
We are 20 minutes in, and some bingo cards are already filled out, I think. So good job on that. But exciting divisional games, and certainly looking forward to the championship games on Sunday, although I'll be flying out for the Senior Bowl, so I always kind of miss some of these games. Anyway.
George Kittle.
There you go.
What a guy.
Well, that's the free space. That's already been
there you go. Man, that guy is something. He's fun to watch.
He is. Let's see here. Let's go back to Pittsburgh and focus in on them. Not a lot of news here in terms of hard news this weekend. Brian Flores reportedly interviewing with the Arizona Cardinals Monday morning for their vacant head coaching opening, and then also reported over the weekend the Minnesota Vikings requested an interview with Brian Flores for their DC job after firing Ed Donatel after 1 year. Kevin O'Connell and the head coach of Minnesota and Brian Flores have some ties back to their time in New England. And Flores also has ties to the new GM in Arizona. So that's the latest update there. Still no hirings for either of those spots in Minnesota or Arizona. And frankly, I'm not sure when those will happen. It sounds like, the Broncos are pretty slow moving in this thing in their head coaching search. I've talked about how I think Sean Payton's the domino that has to fall. He's not talking to Denver until Wednesday. We may not know for still another week or so in terms of where these pieces will fall. So, it's kind of been a really long and drawn out process.
I tell you, going back a couple of weeks ago, my gut was telling me Flores probably, maybe not it. Might end up even staying in Pittsburgh, but I think it's a game changer, or was a game changer when they announced that new general manager over there, and the ties that him and Flores have going all the way back to the Patriots there. That's hard to ignore at this point. And I think all the betting sites, or most of the betting sites, have Flores as the favorite now when it comes to that. So I guess at this point, I'll be more shocked if Flores doesn't get that job. And then I guess it becomes, will he find something that suits him favorably from a defensive coordinator job, or is a lot of this just Rooney Rule satisfying the Rooney Rule kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to know for sure. Again, just what's on the board right now for Flores. He's interviewed with Atlanta. He's interviewing right now essentially with Arizona, and expected to interview later this week with Minnesota. And so those are the three teams on the board. He interviewed with Cleveland. They hired Jim Schwartz, and so that's taken off the table. So I really don't know how this will go. I thought we would have more answers by now, or getting close to answers. It feels like we're still a ways away from kind of all the pieces falling into place across the league.
Who do you want to see in a Super Bowl? We forgot to do our pre-playoff kind of Super Bowl picks that we do annually. Shame on us. But at this point, who would you like to see in the Super Bowl?
Well, I was sticking with my preseason picks of Buffalo over Philadelphia. Now, Buffalo, clearly that is not going to happen. Who do I want to see? I mean, I don't have a particular rooting preference, I guess. I mean, AFC, you're going to get a really good quarterback regardless. And then in the NFC, I mean, I picked the Eagles, so I want to see the Eagles, if for nothing else, just me to be right about that.
Well, I got you. I'd like to see the Eagles and the Chiefs, I think.
Okay, yeah, Mahomes hurts. I get that. That'd be fun. But yeah, with Flores, we'll just wait and see. Certainly the ties in Arizona make sense, but, the ownership's going to have a role in picking the head coach as well, I assume. So, and they've had a pretty exhaustive search with Vance Joseph. Sean Payton still, I think, potentially in the mix. And so if Sean Payton says, hey, I want to come to Arizona, he probably will be Arizona's next head coach.
All right.
Let's get to a story, and it's one that seems to come up every, 3 or 4 years on Twitter. Rashard Mendenhall, and I don't even know how to properly frame this one. I'm not even entirely sure where this came from, because I wasn't online much yesterday. Maybe you can speak to it more, but Rashard Mendenhall taking some shots that appeared at Ben Roethlisberger, essentially saying that he's not a leader and just not too happy with, I guess, the way that he went about his business in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, same Rashard Mendenhall that I think called Ben Roethlisberger a racist a couple years ago with the you're right. It does seem like this happens every 3 years or something along the lines that he's back in the news. And boy, if he wanted the attention yesterday, we're giving it to him.
Briefly, I hope, but yeah, we will.
Yeah. I think that ever since that fumble in the Super Bowl and the backlash from that, I just think he's had a very, very hard time putting that in a rearview mirror. You know, I really, really do. And even wasn't there a video just recently of Mike Tomlin? It all started from I think about a week ago. Rashard was back in the Steelers facility. There's some pictures of him on Twitter making the rounds. Mike Tomlin had some sort of video, a nice video directed toward Rashard Mendenhall. And then it seems like, he gets that kind of stuff. And then he tweets out a few things, this past week. Obviously, in some of the replies, the fumbles brought up and all. I just don't think he handles all of that well, and I think it causes him to lash out. And look, I don't know anything about his relationship, what it was like with Roethlisberger and all like that, but something along the way, at least in Mendenhall's side, has frayed it. At this point, with this being in the news now, it would be good to hear Ben Roethlisberger address it. I don't know if he will or not. He might not.
Yeah, I mean, what do you even say? And you give it more air if he says it, then really brings it to the forefront. I don't think Ben would be wise to address it.
I mean, there's something there. Unless, and it very well could be Mendenhall kind of, manufacturing it himself, but I think a lot of this stems back from the fumble in the Super Bowl and all the backlash that has seemed to has gotten over the years and all. And, he's always been a thinker, the thinker type anyway, he's out there with some of his, with some of his thoughts and kind of, because of his beliefs that way, alienates himself from a large majority of the population, within all that. And yeah, I mean, once again, here's the attention that you asked for.
Right. Yeah, I don't have really a whole lot to comment or say other than I think we all just have to move on from the fumble component. I'm sure it's been tough for Mendenhall to give him some grace and fairness where you're on Twitter, and anytime you say anything that can be even moderately disagreeable, then you probably get a million tweets and photos about you fumbling in the Super Bowl. And that's, the worst moment of your football career. Being reminded of that constantly probably isn't any good for your mental health and sanity. But, he's got to move on. He's got to stop talking about the past. And I think Steeler fans have to move on as well. It happened. It sucks. It was a decade plus ago, and it's not really worth trying to relive and bring back up every 2 years.
I tell you, the most troubling thing out of all this, I think about 4 hours ago from the time we're recording this, somebody tweeted back to him about "Don't be so foolish, Rashard. A lot of running backs would do anything to have experiences you had, and you're going to put the spotlight on yourself this way with a question mark. Come on, man." Then he responds back, "Or kill myself like other players." I mean, ooh. That's the, he's struggling with this from a mental aspect, and I just hope he gets some help and talks to somebody, and hopefully the next time we're talking about him, it's not, him doing something to himself or harming himself in any ways. And look, it's unfortunate that this game, the NFL and the fan bases is, that if you do have one play like that in a big moment of of the league's biggest game, it can end up following you and will end up following you around the rest of your life. But you just got to try to get past it, not let it define you of who you are.
Sure. Sure. And just hopefully there's some, people in his community, in his life that are checking in on him. Maybe some teammates. I don't know. Some people in his personal life can make sure that he's okay, because you never want to see that kind of language or those kinds of thoughts being expressed. So that's a story there. It became something, late last night. So that's kind of why we're talking about it. And frankly, there isn't a lot else to discuss right now. Dave, to make the transition into some cap stuff, just give us a quick cap update. I think you have a little bit of new information for us.
Yeah, the whole, they signed Anthony Miller back to the offseason roster last week. That ended up being a veteran benefit contract, just like we thought it would be as of Saturday morning, based on projections and proven performance escalator raises, and the cap being at maybe at $225 million. I have the team sitting right now with their rule of 51 at $51,148 under the cap. And once again, I take into account the offseason workout bonus charge placeholder. I've already accounted for the raises, the predicted raises in the proven performance escalators for Alex Highsmith and Kevin Dotson. I already have Cameron Sutton in the dead money category. As of right now, we'll see what happens there. So, this team's right. Basically, this team's right at the number. And once again, you can lop a lot of that off with just turning William Jackson loose, because that will free up a little over $12 million in salary cap space prior to roster displacement with him. And that gives you, a little bit of money, at least, just a starting point to get some things done in free agency. And look, $12 million in cap space with some of these re-signings will go a long way when you're talking about roster displacement and all like that. Now, will they need more as the offseason progresses? Obviously, yes. And I know a lot of people don't like me putting out their projected future salary cap space expenses, like injured reserve, practice squad, rookie draft pool. But at some point, that stuff has to be accounted for. It's just, where's the line in the sand where that has to be accounted for? So really the main thing people really should concentrate on right now is that this team is just 51,000 under the cap. They're obviously going to have to make some moves to free up some cap money by March, by the middle of March, start of free agency to get some things done there. And they will do that. William Jackson being one of those things. We'll see what happens with Mitch Trubisky, Miles Jack, those kind of things there. So that's your update.
Definitely, Dave. Still expecting several cap clearing moves this offseason. I know Matthew Marksey wrote this morning an article, but just asking the question, will Miles Jack be one of those cap casualties? I know we discussed that a bit as well. Probably not immediately, but it is a thought, just given the clearing it would, create, in Jack probably not being the player that Pittsburgh hoped he would when they signed him.
Yeah, I still, from where I sit right now, looking at their situation, I think at the very least he makes it past March 15th and see where it goes from there. Is it possible, however, that he winds up being a casualty? Yeah, it's. I don't think you can totally discount it. But this team's got some decisions with a couple of those guys, most notably Trubisky and Miles Jack there. I think those are two guys to really, really watch here, and Witherspoon as well too. I think that's another one that you can add to the list. But I think the main four to watch between now and March 15th are obviously William Jackson III. I mean, he's not going to be on this roster at that salary by March 15th. And then it probably goes Mitch Trubisky, Miles Jack, and then Keller Witherspoon. Those are the four I think to keep your eye on the most between now and March 15th.
Would they do any restructures before free agency, or is that more of a summer clear cap to get ready for 2023 in-season type stuff?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they will need to do it. I mean, could they? Absolutely, they could. There's no roster bonuses involved here that from a timeline aspect that makes you go, oh, we got to get that done now. because there's a March roster bonus due on Minka or TJ Watt. It feels like more of a thing that let's get into the summer where we have those back end of the offseason, expenses that we have to cover. Let's make sure these guys stay healthy, those guys. So if I was to guess right now, no, we won't see any restructures between at least now and March 15th. But obviously any time after that could happen. But I tend to believe that it's looking like more of a post-start of training camp situation when it comes to restructures on either Watt, Minka, or both of them.
Gotcha. That seems to be the Steelers' MO in terms of when they most typically restructure contracts. So anything else that'll happen cap-wise, aside from cap casualties from here until like March 15th, that's going to be really worth keeping an eye on?
I don't think overall, no, because, once you get into the offseason, what are you going to do with Alex Highsmith? That obviously is going to be a big question. And then the re-signing of your own free agents. Cameron Sutton obviously leading the list of that. We've already had a pretty good talk about that. We'll talk about him more as we get into this thing, I'm sure. And then how aggressive are you going to be in outside free agency?
Are there any other even potential extension candidates besides Highsmith? I know that would take place in, June, July, August, but is it really just Highsmith?
It really feels like it's just a Highsmith, Alex.
Okay.
I mean, let's running down the list here.
I mean, Dotson won't be one. Claypool's gone. Thinking about that 2020 draft class.
Yeah, I'm not saying, it's too early for Freiermuth. He needs another year in the league before that can happen. You just did Deontay. You just gave Chukwuma a deal last offseason. James Daniels, a newcomer on a new deal. That's probably nothing there. Mason Cole. No, I mean, it pretty much is, Alex Highsmith is the guy that if they do an extension with, he's probably it.
Okay. Yeah. And that'll be a big deal if it does get done, obviously. And so it'll be one to watch. But again, that will not be a deal in all likelihood that will take place until the summer, June, probably at the earliest. Right.
Once again, it's a situation once the guys get into camp, and it might be one of those 11th hour things again, one of those. Now it'd be interesting to see, does Alex Highsmith do one of those soft, holdouts?
Hold-ins. Yeah.
The hold-ins.
Yeah. I mean, now Khan was quicker than Colbert. I mean, because Minka got done in June and Deontay got done only midway through camp.
Right.
So I think they're a bit quicker now.
Here's the thing: if you want to get him done, get him done.
Right, because Colbert. I mean, I know that Khan was the contract guy, but Colbert was still running the show, and they were always 11th hour deals. TJ Watt, remember Troy was getting on a plane for week one when they signed his deal way back when, a decade plus ago. So it feels like there's a bit more urgency and a bit more, as you said, we both want to get the deal done. Let's not play this game and try to wait it out. Let's just get the deal done under Omar Khan.
Right. Here's the thing. I don't think I will be surprised if it gets done before they get to training camp.
Okay.
But once you get there, I wouldn't think that it would be that hard to hammer it out. It gets into, are they going to take him a lot down the line with at least the first 2 years of guaranteed money? That's going to be the other big decision with Cameron Sutton here is, how much, is that wall down now when it comes to your top end re-signings and your extension, your top extension guys?
Right. That's a fair point. Now, I know that Minka was done before camp, but that deal felt easier because everybody knew he was going to become the highest paid safety in football. It was kind of an easier number to start with. I think Highsmith's a bit trickier in terms of where you slot him. Obviously, he won't become the highest paid edge rusher on his own team or in the NFL. And so there's a bit tricky. It's a trickier metric in terms of how much you want to pay him.
Right.
But I think it will get done sometime in the summer during training camp. So that is the cap update. Anything else changes, Dave will certainly let us know. Dave, Senior Bowl coming up here will be in Shrine Bowl as well. I think the guys are leaving for the Shrine Bowl on Thursday. I'll be flying out Sunday. Senior Bowl really kicks off first practice just over a week from now, next Tuesday. One guy that will be at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, that I think really kind of screams Steeler. I know it's super early in this process for myself and just the draft thoughts in general, but Wisconsin defensive lineman Keeanu Benton, to me, really kind of checks all those boxes that says this guy is a player and a prospect Pittsburgh's going to be really interested in watching.
Boy, interesting selection by you right out of the box, right? What got you going down his rabbit hole right out of the chute?
Because he's 6'4", 317 with long arms and played in Wisconsin. And as a defensive lineman, that's a good place to start. And so I wanted to see more. I know he had the reputation of a good run stuffer and has that look and that size. We talk about it so much, Dave. It's so hard to find that body type, just not even the play, but just the body type of a Steelers defensive lineman, the Cam Haywards, Stephon Tuitt's, Chris Wormley's of the world. And that's why they liked Isaiah Loudermilk a couple of years ago and moved up to get him. I mean, Benton to me is that, to a T, looks like a defensive lineman in Pittsburgh system. Again, 6'4", 317 listed. I don't know his length for sure. He'll weigh in at the Senior Bowl. It sounds like he's got about 34-inch arms. I mean, that is the way that Pittsburgh wants to build this thing. And his tape has its flaws, but I think he's a good prospect overall.
And I believe you said the Michigan State tape on him is the most impressive of the lot that you watched.
Yeah, had a really good game against Michigan State. Just kind of the skinny on him. He's strong. He's a former wrestler, understands leverage, hand placement. He's got a little bit of quickness to his game in terms of a pass rusher, some bend. He can penetrate and get in the backfield. He played in that Wisconsin kind of pro-style defense under Jim Leonard that asked him to play as a true zero tech, one tech in a 3-4 front to stunt, both in run game and pass game to get his hands up. I mean, just kind of, conceptually, a lot of what Wisconsin did, Pittsburgh does pretty similar. So it's easier to imagine how he's going to fit in your system. Again, very similar to the evaluation and thought on Loudermilk 2 years ago. And so he's got to be, his pass rush, his bull rush is pretty weak. He's got to improve there, be a better power rusher. But I just think fundamentally the baseline stuff he checks is very much what Pittsburgh wants.
Was he a captain, I think he was. Don't the Badgers do him by game or something?
Yeah, I don't know if they had team captains. I never saw that. I can just.
It says a team captain yeah, he was a team captain. So there's another box for you.
Oh, that's great. There you go. Good information. So yeah, again, all of those boxes. So he checks, and I'll watch him in some of the 1v1s in Mobile this upcoming week.
Man, he looks like it, doesn't he?
Yeah, really built, really. And again, it's so hard to find those guys because there's a lot of tweeners.
He's got that Tuitt build to him.
Yeah, and to find the length to go up against. Now, he's more of an interior guy, but I think he can probably play out on the edge if he has to because he's got the size for it and the strength for it. So, again, it's hard to find those guys that are built like Hayward these days that are like legit, 6'5", 300 with 33-plus-inch arms. Very few of them exist, and he's one of those guys.
Well, I'm very disappointed in you because you got this before the Senior Bowl. Now, you're not going to be able to zero in on him and pull him. In other words, all the other beat writers that read our stuff are now on to him now, and now you're going to have a crowd around him. Shame on you.
I do want to talk to him. Hopefully I can steal an interview with him. Again, salt of the earth kind of guy, wrestler and a really good wrestler in high school as well. And that's not always the say all end all, obviously, but there's an understanding of leverage and technique and hand use and that kind of stuff. And you kind of see that in his play.
32 worthy elite. I mean, it's still way early in this process, or is he a more later second round, early third round guy?
Yeah, I've had him pegged as more of a day 2 guy because he's not going to be this high impact pass rusher. He's got a couple of moves, but he's not going to be. It's enough where he's not going to be a lot of right. He's got some pass rush juice, but he's going to be a 3-4 sack a season kind of guy. My comp was Dalvin Tomlinson, who was a wrestler in high school as well, played at Alabama, similar NFL type system, big, strong kind of guy. So I view him as a day 2 type.
Well, that's a hell of a out of the chute shot right there for sure. And we've talked about this team. I feel pretty confident this team's going to address the defensive line in the draft at some point within the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, I think, again, trenches is where Andy Weidel builds this thing. And so I think you're going to see a pretty heavy influence there.
All right.
Anything else, Dave? It's kind of all that I had basically to share today. Should mention, you asked me earlier about what team do I want to see. Again, not that I'm rooting for anything in particular, but to see Juju play in a Super Bowl for the Chiefs, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm rooting for that as well too, man. You got quite a few former Steelers. I'm not rooting for the Bengals, but man, Mike, what do you think about Mike Hilton's play in that game? And that was a typical Mike Hilton game, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's just one of those fierce corners off the edge, can blitz, annoying, place to run well, tough edge kind of dude. So very much typical Mike Hilton.
I mean, you got Juju still alive. You got Mike Hilton still alive. You got Javon Hargrave still alive. Ray McLeod with the 49ers. So former Steelers going to win a Super Bowl this year.
That's a good point. I guess somebody will. And so at least somebody is winning playoff games that are former Steelers, because the Steelers themselves, it's been a while.
All right.
All right, Dave, that kind of wraps things up. We can get through some reader emails and close out today's show.
Paul Brown, Rashard Mendenhall. I know you guys won't want to give this much fodder, Paul. We already did, believe it or not. However, Mendenhall is having his yearly outburst over the Super Bowl fumble bin and the other nonsense. He says, personally, as a fan of the players, even after they leave the team, I really think the Steelers need to give the guy some help, because this time around he mentioned suicide. I really hate for something to happen to the guy over something as silly as one play in a game. Or the fans' reaction. I know the diehard listeners of this podcast are reasonable people and have let the play go, but it's been 12 years. Steelers fans need to lay off Rashard. Look, as we talked about earlier in the show, unfortunately, every time he makes an appearance on something or points out something on Twitter, you're gonna get this kind of backlash from it. It's not going to go away, and he's going to have to find a better way to deal with it overall. And hopefully with this latest tweet this morning that we talked about, maybe guys from the NFLPA or former teammates. Yeah. I mean, people close to him hopefully will reach out to him and see if they can help him in some way there. But I mean, all we can do is kind of, highlight it and talk about it and hope that he doesn't do harm to himself about it. But I mean, nothing that we're going to say are going to decrease the amount of pushback that this guy gets for that one play.
No, probably not. But I do agree with the sentiment that I think everybody has to move on. Mendenhall should stop talking about the past and whatever accusations he wants to throw around. It does nobody any good, and especially himself. And I think anyone just stop bringing up the fumble. Everybody just move on. It's better for all of us.
Elliot Eubanks writes in, Dear Dave and Alex, second time, long time. The site is tremendous, and what you guys do is top notch. Huge fan, and you should be proud of what you created. Thanks for that, Elliot. In my opinion, Burrow took a tremendous leap when they drafted Chase. It raised Burrow's confidence, gave him an escape plan that was inherently built from college, and allowed the offense to grow. He says if Jordan Addison is 75% of what Chase is, are the Steelers doing Kenny a disservice if you do not draft him at 17th overall if available. He says, team listening, backing him, added confidence, fills a need, gives him an escape plan that is inherently built, etc. He says, I believe we have greater needs, defensive line, offensive line, outside linebacker, cornerback, in that order. But if Kenny is a franchise, I think this is something that we need to do. What are your thoughts? Thank you for the time and effort. Take care, and thanks again. Look, we're, like it or not, one way or the other, we're going to be talking about Jordan Addison for the next several weeks here, for sure. Kenny will help that along with every other interview or every interview being asked about him. Do I truly believe Kenny would like Jordan Addison on the Steelers? Yes, I do. I see some people kind of frame this up as the Steelers have more important needs and they don't use slot receivers anyway. the fact that they're not using slot receivers is not a good answer to that. I don't think where we sit right now, I don't think you can totally discount the notion of that happening, period. And then, I mean, that I don't know what more. I mean, once again, we're going to be talking about Jordan Addison all off season here. And didn't you just did the profile on him, Alex, yep, and all? And it's going to be interesting to see how he tested the combine and those kind of things there. But the old smoke, the old fire wither smoke situation, and not just because the whole Jamar Chase Burrow thing there, but even though that's going to be a talking point along the way that people are going to bring up in this, I genuinely think Kenny Pickett would like to have Jordan Addison in Pittsburgh.
Sure, 100%. It's just a question of what is the right value. I understand all the connections and the usefulness of drafting Jordan Addison to pair with Kenny Pickett. There's a need in the slot. There's a need for another weapon. It would be good for Pickett. To me, and maybe this is a bit more of a controversial take, is Addison worth that 17th pick just from a value perspective? And again, judging who do you take in January is a tough thing to do based on the board and team needs and the other half dozen variables. But is Addison, to me, that really first round type receiver talent that you can say so confidently that he is? I don't know if I get there. I viewed him kind of more of a day two guy. So not to split hairs so much so early in this process, but I would be more comfortable taking him, say, with that first pick in the second round than I would be as a first round pick that my whole, draft class is based off of.
And we have seen this thing shift over the years, especially this early in the offseason. A lot of people have Addison as their number one or number two wide receiver in this draft class. You might get come draft time and a lot of people might have him round 3 or 4 or 5 at that point,
Right. And he's going to be viewed as one of the better receivers in this class, but there's also acknowledgement this receiver class is a lot weaker than past classes. Like, it's not even close to what it's been, last year or the past couple editions. And so while he may be the top receiver in this class, had he been in last year's draft class, for example, now he's coming off a great year, but the point is, he probably wouldn't have been one of the top guys. So putting aside number one versus number two, what is your actual grade or ranking? There's a difference there.
Elliot, rest assured that we will be talking about Jordan Addison more the rest of the offseason. Cody Harvard just hit the email machine here. He says, "Hi, Dave and Alex. Cody here. I was wanting your opinion on the offensive line. Would you guys be open to drafting a center?" He says, "My personal favorite is John Michael Schmitz. I believe that's the Minnesota kid. And have Mason Cole battle with Dotson at guard." He says, "I would also like to bring in a tackle, maybe not from the draft, but free agency to compete with Dan Moore Jr." He says, "Either way, we need depth in case the injury bug comes around in 2023. He says, "I know Alex has issues with Dotson, mostly mental, but I think he has shown he can somewhat handle his role." He says, "I'm pretty down on Dan Moore Jr., though. Thank you guys, as always. And I know all the Steelers Depot Nation is glad to have Uncle Dave back for another season. It means a lot. Happy off season. Can't wait for y'all's insight." Thanks for that, Cody. I mean, I don't know how much more clear we can be with this pre-draft process getting underway here. They do need to address the offensive line during the draft with one, if not two picks. I kind of wonder after the two free agent I know everybody wants them to go out and get a top. We talked about Taylor Lewan just recently. I don't think that's going to happen. Long story short, for a high profile, let's say tackle or guard, I just wonder if they're going to go that route free agency. From where I sit right now, my bet would be that they're not going to address the line in free agency, but that they will do it in the draft with one or two selections. I am open to drafting another center, but he better be position flexible. I think Will they draft? I think at one of their picks, if it's whatever, non-guard or non-tackle, could it be a center later on in the draft? I think that's a potential. But long story short, I think they will address the offensive line in the draft, and I would not be surprised if they throw 2 picks at it as well, one early, one late.
Yeah, I think for me, the big question is less about if they're going to add to it and address it. They almost certainly will. But are we talking starter level? Or are we talking backup level? Are we talking about, early picks, late picks, high prize for agent, or more that versatile Joe Hague type of backup? And I'm not quite sure which way this thing's going to go right now. It obviously depends on availability and who's out there, those kinds of factors. Would I have Mason Cole shift to left guard? Probably not. I get the idea, but I thought Cole did such a good job at center, and I know he's listed pretty big, but I don't think he has quite the size that I would prefer to be a guard in Pittsburgh just in terms of kind of filling out his frame. And I just want to keep him at center because I thought he had a really strong year as a communicator, just kind of that anchor point for this O-line. So understand the point there. And, if a top center becomes available, maybe that changes the equation some. But just on that question, which I can probably answer the best right now, I would prefer to keep Cole at center.
People are not going to want to continue hearing this, but be ready for the week 1 offensive line to be exactly the way it was in 2022, barring injury barring this team drafting an offensive lineman in the first round. Those two qualifiers, a first round offensive lineman or an injury happening to one of the 5, be prepared for the same 5 to be the week 1 starters.
The odds of that happening certainly have increased dramatically since even just 2 months ago. So there's a decent chance of that happening, but I do think depth has to be addressed. It has to be better. The depth was still poor last year and just only hidden by the fact of the remarkable health this starting 5 had, which you cannot bank on happening again.
Chris Cordova writes in, Steelers have AFC North trouble. He says, hey guys, I think the next decade are going to be rough for the Steelers. He says, I think the next decade is going to be rough for the Steelers. Watching the playoffs this weekend, I think the biggest issue with keeping Canada is that already have a negative outlook on next season. Watching Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals, Steelers are nowhere near that level of play. They weren't even the best of the last. He says, if it wasn't for the Bengals long snapper getting hurt, Lamar getting hurt, and playing a weak NFC South division, this season outcome would have gone much worse. Plus, I don't think Canada's play calling got better. I think young playmakers started going out of structure more often. I mean, with the Raiders game and Ravens, they did nothing till the fourth quarter. The best I see for them is wild card berth and a long road to the Super Bowl with Canada still around. I doubt even they make the playoffs next year with the young, hungry teams like Jets, Dolphins. That is why it's so sad to see them stick with this guy after 2 years of dog crap. He says, anyway, you guys keep up the good work. Just my thoughts. Chris had to get that off of his chest this morning. Look, there needs to be a big jump on offense right out of the chute in the first 7 games for this team to show us that maybe they can make the playoffs, period. We already talked about yards after the catch. We talked about adjusted net yards for passing attempt, those kind of things there. Make no mistake about it. Yeah, this team has the gap right now on offense for this team to where these other teams are, especially the Final Four right now, is pretty significant.
Yeah, I've mentioned this for a while. The AFC North, the AFC at large is going to be super competitive. And these quarterbacks that we're talking about aren't going anywhere. Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar, we'll see what happens to him, but, he could still conceivably stay in Baltimore. The other up-and-comers that are going to emerge over time. Does Aaron Rodgers get traded, and does he get traded into the AFC? I mean, that can't be ruled out right now. And so, the Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, he'll be better next year. And so these guys aren't going anywhere. You better have a quarterback and a team and an offense that can match with that. Having a good defense is an important counter to these quarterbacks, but at some point, You're going to have to do more than score 17 points per game to beat, Burrow and the Bengals and beat Allen and the Bills and Mahomes and the Chiefs. That's just the math, the reality of it all. And so that's where this team's going to be fighting to try to get back to over the next couple of years.
And how many pieces of this defense can this team get back and keep, kind of have the defense that they had coming out of the season,
Sure. And hopefully they can keep some of those, core role players like a Cam Sutton, like a Terrell Edmonds. But even if this defense plays at the same level as it did the back half of this year, next year, you're not going to really make a run unless your offense can put up points. I mean, this offense ranked 21st in points per game last year, 26th this year. Even the better half of the second half of the season, they still averaged about 20 points per game, if that. And so that's not going to be, that's a path to compete and be a wildcard team and be in these games, sure. But to truly get back into, let's make a run at this thing, it's got to be better than where it currently sits.
And look, I mean, we get it. 99.98% of you listening are still struggling with the decision to retain Canada. Okay. I mean, at some point we've got to move the conversation past that, though.
Yeah, it's just got to move to where does this offense have to go under Canada? Not being mad about them retaining him, but okay, what does he have to show to make that the right choice? And that goes back to the obvious stuff: points per game, red zone play. I mean, literally the last 2 years, Pittsburgh's been 23rd in red zone offense, both in 2021 and 2022. They ranked 23rd in the NFL. You are not going to win games with a 23rd ranked offense in the red zone.
Right. And look, I mean, the other things, yards after catch, explosive plays. A year from now, we're not going to be talking about Canada if this team does not make significant improvements on the offensive side of football.
Yeah, 100%. They got to make big strides, and that's why it can't be about just getting better and making small strides and light at the end of the tunnel type conversation. It has to be they have arrived. And again, doesn't have to mean they're a top 5 offense scoring 30 points per game, but they got to be a top half of the league. They got to be much better in the red zone. They got to create more explosive plays. Those are expectations, not just hopes.
Deshaun Campbell writes, I know you guys give your honest and full opinion on things, so I ask you guys this. He says, I know it's hard to tell because he was just a rookie, but do you guys see anything in Kenny Pickett that tells you he can be anything close to Mahomes, the Allens, or Burrows in the AFC, even lesser with Lamar and Herberts of the world? Or maybe the Steelers don't need him to be that good. Just have a 49ers team around him that will make it easier for him to succeed. Look, Deshaun, that everybody wants to know right now, can Kenny be that guy? And I'll go back to what I always say. I think, we get 6 or 7 games into next season, we're going to have a lot better idea at that point. All I will say is that the things that we learned about Kenny so far, cool as a cucumber, right from the get-go. It's not, the job is not too big for him from a pressure standpoint. We saw some good accuracy with him. We saw the interceptions go down after that rough start, which even so, interceptable balls overall weren't bad for him as a whole. We saw towards the end of the year the ability to extend plays and make plays that way. He's talked several times already this offseason about, once he got into that offense and it was his, slowly making the adjustment to making it his offense and the growing pains that go along with it. Him being a rookie, yada, yada. And I know people want to say, well, look what's going on with Purdy over there. Well, look, that's a testament to what they're able to do with in that Mike Shanahan offense for start, or Kyle Shanahan offense for starters, right? I mean, kudos to them. And to Purdy's credit, he's made some good decisions and thrown some good balls on top of it there. So it's not just that on top of it there. Long answer short, I don't think either one of us, Deshaun, can sit here and tell you right now, can he be in that top 6 category of quarterbacks in this league? It's too early to tell.
Yeah, it's not really where my mind is at right now. I'm just kind of trying to evaluate his rookie year and, can he be the quarterback of the future, the long term? And obviously he'll be the starter for 2023. And there's encouraging signs about his long term prospects. Do I think he'll ever actually truly be a Mahomes or Allen level type of quarterback, a top 2, top 3 in football? Almost certainly not. And that's no knock on him. That's a very elite club to be a part of, and the physical traits and tools that those guys have, Allen especially, are things you just can't teach, and things you really just either you have or you don't have. And Pickett, just doesn't have like 99.9% of other quarterbacks in football. So, but can he become a very good quarterback that's maybe in that tier 2 right behind those guys that can really compete with a good defense and maybe a little bit of good luck on your side? Yeah, potentially. We'll keep watching and, see what jump he makes in 2023. So I understand the question, and it's an important one when you frame again, how do you win long term? How do you compete in an AFC that's going to have those guys playing for the next decade? But right now, I'm just kind of focused on next steps with Kenny Pickett.
How many years of Ben Roethlisberger's career would he have been considered a consensus slam dunk top 5 quarterback in the NFL?
Well, that's a good question. Always competing with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Rodgers. I don't know for sure the answer to that. I want to say it might be a bit more than 2 when you're talking top 5, which is a bit broader. I would maybe say I'm just spitballing. I don't know, 5, 6 years, but I'm just off the top of my head right now.
All right. But for most of his career, probably was he considered top 7?
Yeah, again, I'd have to sit down and think about the list of quarterbacks that played during each kind of decade and era, but that's probably reasonable to say, sure.
And if you can get Kenny to be widely considered, across the board, a top 7 quarterback in the NFL, you can win championships with that.
Yeah, I think so. Again, the concern that I had with Pickett coming out is just I think he could become a very good quarterback, but will you kind of be in that purgatory where he's at a Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr level, where you're a good quarterback and you can make plays and win games and, be solid in the regular season, but can you get over that hump and really compete and drive in the AFC and the playoffs? Are you kind of going to be capped at a 10, 11 win team that gets bounced in the divisional round, something like that? That's maybe the concern about the upside about Kenny Pickett.
I think that first 6, 7 games of 2023, there need to be a lot of the Matthew McConaughey, all right, kind of reactions within that. That to me is the next part of this thing when it comes to evaluating him. I really think that's when we will learn quite a bit more about Kenny Pickett.
Sure, but what Pickett did down the stretch this year, especially some of those glimpses at the out of structure plays, gave me a ton of encouragement for what he can do next year.
Right. I mean, there were things to definitely build on down the stretch in those last few games.
Right. So we will take it one step at a time, see how he looks in year 2 and go from there.
Let's see. Taylor Carpenter writes in, Dave and Alex, I'll keep it brief as I know Dave gets annoyed at long emails. My question to both of you is, will the Steelers trade back into 2023 draft at any point? Yes or no? Go. He says, I just looked back at the Eagles trade history over the last few drafts, and they appeared to be very active, including trading back several times. Kevin Colbert almost never traded back, he says, most seeming to not even field trade calls. When you look at how quickly most of the Steelers picks came in, I'm hoping the new regime will have a more open mind to trading back. We need a serious infusion of young talent. In my opinion, I would have preferred to address our needs via the draft, then free agency. Best Steelers coverage out there, guys. I never miss an episode. Taylor in Athens, Ohio. Getting predictive and that kind of stuff is just, incredible. He wants a yes or no right now. I will say no.
I will say yes for the reasons that the reader mentioned. No guarantees. It's all case by case, but I think there'll be a much greater appetite under Kahn and Weidl to move up and down the board, especially down, than it was under Kevin Colbert.
All right, Taylor, you got a 1 yes and 1 no. Please do not bring it up again unless I wind up being correct here.
Those are the rules.
Those are the rules. We'll pretend that Alex never said it. If they did, look, I don't know. I mean, could they? Absolutely, they could. You just never know how these things are going to go.
Right.
I don't think you're going to see it in the first couple of rounds, for sure. But never say never.
Yeah. I can't say that right now. We'll see.
Let's see. I think we got through most of them. I think we got through most of them here, Alex. So, all
right.
What are we, about an hour today?
Yeah, a little bit shorter today. We do have a live stream tonight at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So be sure to check that out, and you can ask more of those questions with Dave and myself, 7 p.m. Eastern time.
All right. Go to Alex's. What do all the kids say? Subscribe, like.
Yeah, smash that like button.
Oh, okay.
And subscribe. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, do all that, and we look forward to a big crowd later on tonight. So in the meantime, we will be back on Wednesday. When's the bat signal going to go up for Art Rooney, Alex?
Probably Wednesday as we're recording is kind of the way that Rooney will probably do it to us.
I will take that as opposed to them waiting until Friday within that. But anyway, whatever happens between now and Wednesday, Alex and I will be back to talk about it. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, please go to SteelersDepot.com and hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you want an ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com, go hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar and follow the directions that way. I think we had a couple of signups of that last couple of days as well, too. Emails, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Hope you're reading all the great draft profiles we have coming out on SteelersDepot.com. A lot of people participating in that. We will have the Vegas crew out here by the end of the week here to cover the East-West Shrine game. And a couple of days later, Alex will be taking a handful of the guys to Mobile, if you will, to cover the Senior Bowl down there. So a lot of exciting stuff going on for us. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.